Homage to the perfection of wisdom, the mother of all the victorious ones of the three times, which is beyond words, inconceivable, inexpressible, unproduced and unobstructed in the nature of space, the objective domain of self-aware wisdom. That yada gata gata para gata para sangha de buddhi soha, that yada gata gata para gata para sangha de buddhi soha, that yada gata gata para sangha de buddhi soha. Through the knowledge of all the Shravakas, seeking peace are led to true peace. Through the knowledge of path, through those intended to benefit transmigrating beings fulfill the aims of the world. Being perfectly endowed with omniscient mind, the Munis give various teachings with all kinds of aspects. I bow down to the mother of Buddhas, together with the communities of hearers and bodhisattvas. I prostrate to the perfect Buddha, the best of all teachers, who taught that which arises through dependent relationship is without cessation, without arising, without annihilation, without permanence, without coming, without going, without distinction, without ending, peaceful, free from fabrications. Homage to the Gautama, who, moved by his compassion, taught the sacred Dharma to rid us of all misconceived views. So Master Nagarjuna, in his at the end of Mula Madhyamaka Karika, in gratitude to the Buddha, he composed this verse. The last was homage to the Gautama, who, moved by his compassion, toward the sacred Dharma and to rid us of all misconceived views. So to rid us of, or eliminate all, dispel all wrong views or distorted views. So the views here refer to those which have no good reason, which are distorted. In other words, the afflicted intelligence. So those views which have no basis of intelligence are slightly better, but the other ones which are afflicted intelligence or because you have reasons to believe that you use, they are more stronger. So within the system of the mind, what we talk about is certain states of mind, mental states, are countered by their antidotes. Externally, we have the coldness and hotness, which counter one another. So within the mind, how one serves as a counter force to the other is such that the two states of mind, the distorted and the right state of mind, have the same object, but they view the object, apprehend the object differently, and therefore, in order to get rid of the afflicted wisdom or afflicted intelligence, that is the view here that is referred to as view. And so, what that view is in the Mula Madhyamaka Karika, it is mentioned in the salutation verse. Master Nagarjuna says, the one who teaches that which arises through dependence is without cessation and without arising. So it goes through, the Master Nagarjuna touches on the 8 extreme views. And so those which have decrease and increase are referred to as without having cessation and arising. And then with regard to the object, he refers to, he mentions that of annihilation and permanence, without permanence. and coming and going in relation to time, and then to that with regard to certain designation, he refers to the things without distinction and identity. And so these 8 extremes, or 8 aspects, such as cessation, arising, annihilation, permanence, and so forth, are not in the intrinsic nature of the mind or intrinsic nature of things as such. But we have a distorted view of things, phenomena, and self, and therefore, by developing that wisdom, understanding the true nature of things, through the understanding of dependent origination, understanding that things have no intrinsic existence, independent existence, and therefore things are devoid of, from that point of view, the 8 extremes. And therefore, from his own experience, the Buddha taught the dependent origination which is absent of the 8 extremes. And therefore, he taught us that dharma, which is taught being moved by compassion towards sentient beings. So solely because of his compassion and love towards sentient beings, like that of a mother to her only child, so when he saw that all sentient beings are tormented by their mental afflictions, and which is because of all these faults that are within the sentient beings, are because of not understanding the reality or the truth of dependent origination. And therefore, the Buddha independently taught from his own experience that of dependent origination to overcome our distorted views and afflictions and so forth. And therefore, Je Tsongkhapa says, amongst teachers, the one who teaches dependent origination, and amongst wisdom, the wisdom understanding that and also in the Mula Madhyamata Karika, Master Nagarjuna says, seeing dependent origination, one will understand suffering, origination, cessation, and the true path. So what dependent origination shows is that things are related to or dependent upon others. So of course, even the ordinary people would know that some effect comes from its cause. So when we, within the understanding of the dependent origination, not only is the effect dependent on or related to the cause, but even the cause itself is dependent on or related to the effect. So of course this is not about the temporal succession between the effect and the cause, that the cause comes later than the effect, but because they are dependently originated, originated, therefore we can talk very well about, correctly about that of the causality, dependence in terms of causality. And therefore, the true cessation also is dependent on our effort, although the effort is not so much of a cause of that true cessation as such, and therefore what we need is that of the development of the understanding of the truth, and develop that of the true path within oneself, which serves as the counter factor to those of the afflictions, and thereby overcoming the afflictions you attain true cessation. And therefore, when we talk about gaining this true understanding, we also come to talk about those of the valid cognition or knowledge and invalid cognition or knowledge. And so the effects that we desire come from those of the valid knowledge, correct knowledge about things. And so even today we can talk about economics, environment, and so forth in terms of how they are dependently originated or interdependent. So whether it's science today, I mean, the whole of the universe, together with its inhabitants, the beings living in them, are all interconnected. And therefore, what we depend on becomes important. For example, the environment in which we as human beings live, we are dependent on it. And therefore, if there is destruction or decline in the environment that we live in, that also affects us. Accordingly, it also affects us if if things go right in the environment. That also helps us. And human beings, as a social animal, I mean, we need to pay attention to those that we depend on, others. And therefore, understanding of dependent origination or interconnectedness really gives a new awareness into the nature of things, how we perceive them, how we relate to them. So one scientist has told me that in the past, this idea or the concept of interdependence was not part of science as such, but because of having discussions with the Buddhist scholars and masters, it has kind of pushed itself to gain a seat or a chair in amongst the scientists, this idea or the concept of dependent origination. And so Master Nagarjuna and so forth, the Buddha and so forth have explained dependent origination or interdependent nature of things to help others. Therefore, compassion or affection, as we all desire happiness, Shantideva says, all suffering in the world or misery in the world come from selfish attitude, selfishness, and all happiness and joy come from thinking of others, wishing to have others to have happiness. So of course, when we talk about thinking or caring about others, it's not completely ignoring your own well-being as such. Because from the point of view of those with sharp faculty following the teaching of the Buddha, by understanding that of the concept of interdependent nature of things and beings, they actually have compassion towards others, but they also are able to help themselves. So of course compassion in itself is not an analytical aspect of mind which critically analyzes the nature of things as such, but it is dependent on that understanding of which comes through the analytical analysis of the nature of things. So, in other words, we can refer to the accumulation of merit or positive energy through compassion and so forth, and also that of the accumulation or of the wisdom. And Master Nagarjuna says, may through this virtue or wholesome deeds all sentient beings accumulate, complete the accumulation of merit and wisdom, thereby bringing about that of the Buddha's Rupakaya and Dharmakaya. So the main practice here in the Bodhisattva Avatara is that of altruism or bodhicitta, compassion. And then there is also the teaching on the correct view of emptiness, mainly in the 9th chapter, although in the other chapters also there are references to this view. And with regards to developing that of the altruistic intention or the spirit of bodhicitta or spirit of enlightenment, there are two different systems. One is the cause and effect instruction, the sevenfold cause and effect instruction, where the first 6, beginning with that of recognizing all sentient beings as having been one's mother and so forth, comprise the cause, and then the bodhicitta as the effect. And then there is the other system, which is the equaling and exchanging self and others. So this is in accordance, taught in accordance with the followers or disciples with sharp faculty. So the first chapter here in this book is about the benefit of the awakening mind, and the third chapter, in the third chapter you generate or cultivate that of bodhicitta, and as ancillary to it, we have the practice of the 7 limbs. And then the third chapter is the beholding the awakening mind. So having made some promise or accepted to do things that are good for others, if you actually in practice do not do that, but if you do something else, then that's like deceiving sentient beings. So we have promised before the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas to dedicate ourselves for the well-being of others, and therefore, having made that pledge, you should on a daily basis practice altruism, do practices which are beneficial to other sentient beings. Otherwise, it would be like deceiving or lying to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas if you do not do that on a daily basis. So having made such a pledge, if I do not take care of the other sentient beings, then I would be deceiving the Bodhisattvas, and I would also create negative karmas that would lead me to the suffering and so forth. So Buddhism in general, and particularly the Nalanda tradition, demonstrates the truth of the teaching of the Buddha through reason. So when we talk about cause and effect, the effects must arise through their causes. And there are many different causes which bring about the different kinds of effects or fruits. And so each fruit with different aspects, different characteristics and so forth, are the results of the different causes and conditions that have brought them about. So for example, in the case of the feather of peacock, which has myriad colors, multicolored feather of the peacock tails have their own causes and conditions. So at this time, when we have found this human life and also met with the teaching of the Buddha, we have the great opportunity to serve others. The Buddha himself, when he was alive, was able to serve so many beings. And then the 7 successors to the Buddha, and also Master Nagarjuna and his disciples and so forth, and then the masters of Tibet, belonging to the Sajjan Nyingma, Kyeluka, Yun, Chonang, and so forth, have been able to serve sentient beings through their practice of the Dharma. So if we had actually met them and applied the teaching within ourselves in those times, we would be in a different situation than where we are now. But today, at this time, when we have this opportunity to engage in the practice of the Dharma, having found this precious human life, if you are not able to do that, to do things which are beneficial to others and practice the Dharma sincerely, then you might rather think that you are not worth human being a human. So the teachings that you hear here, you should keep them in your mind and contemplate on them, especially that of the ceremony that we had yesterday, that of generating bodhicitta. Must be reminded. You must remind yourself of this so that you make your human life a worthy and precious one. On a day-by-day basis, you may make progress within by days, weeks, months, and years. And therefore, it is very important also to show, to be heedful of what you should not do, and to be careful about what you should not do and what you should do in terms of the virtuous practices on a daily basis. Although enemies such as hatred and craving have neither any arms nor legs and are neither courageous nor wise, how have I, like a slave, been used by them? For a while they dwell within my mind. For while they dwell in my mind at their pleasure, they cause me harm. Yet I patiently endure them without any anger. But this is an inappropriate and shameful time for patience. Should even all the gods and demigods rise up against me as my enemies, they could not lead nor place me in the roaring fires of deepest hell. Yet the mighty foe, these disturbing conceptions, in a moment can cast me amidst those flames, which when met will cause not even the ashes of the king of mountains to remain. All other enemies are incapable of remaining for such a length of time, and so forth. So we consider people who are harming us as our enemies. Focusing on them, we can practice patience, we can actually enhance our practice of tolerance and affection, compassion, and so forth. And so the main enemy, the actual enemy, is within ourselves, those of our mental afflictions. So verse number 32 says, all other enemies are incapable of remaining for such a long length of time, as can my disturbing conceptions. The enduring enemy has neither beginning nor end. So if I agreeably honor and entrust myself to others, they will bring me benefit and happiness. But if I entrust myself to these disturbing conceptions or mental afflictions, in the future they will bring only misery and harm. While in cyclic existence, how can I be joyful and unafraid if in my heart I readily prepare a place for this incessant enemy of long duration, the sole cause for the increase of all harms, all that harms me? So we are on chapter conscientiousness.
소속독을 자야기
So the destructive emotions that we have, the mental afflictions, are within ourselves, which actually destroy our happiness.
자신다 나도 배야요.
So because it is within our own mind stream,
그도 년부터는 다
what we can do is to oppose it from within. And there's no other way to counter these destructive emotions or mental afflictions. So in the process of developing kindness and altruism and so forth, we need to show conscientiousness and then practice that of the mindfulness, and so that we don't forget the practices that we need to cultivate within ourselves. So on a daily basis, if you are conscientious, are careful, you will be, first of all, you should know what are to be rejected and what are to be adopted in your as part of your practice. So if you know that somebody is always there who is your adversary, then you would always be very careful to actually put some kind of a spy in the place to check whether the enemy is coming or not. And then similarly within your mind, you should actually check whether your mind is being influenced or is swayed by these destructive emotions or not, and therefore you should show mindfulness as well as introspection. So in guarding alertness, checking what you are doing with your body and mind in all kinds of states, that or again and again is the definition of that of the next we go to the chapter on patience, 6th chapter. So what I said yesterday earlier, anger or hatred is because of hatred you actually kill others or beat others, and also you will deceive others, abuse them. And so because of anger or hatred, a lot of verbal and physical and mental faults arise. So the practice of patience is that which counters our anger or hatred. In short, this text on the Guide of Bodhisattva Way of Life says, 45, verse number 45, it is the fault of the childish that they are hurt, for although they do not wish to suffer, they are greatly attached to its causes. So why should they be angry with others? Just like the guardians of the hell worlds and the forest of razor-sharp leaves. Verse number 45 through to 49, and so the practice of tolerance or patience is very important, and in order to be able to do that, you should have someone provoking anger without whom you cannot practice patience, and therefore you should feel grateful to those who give you the opportunity to practice patience, create the causes for you to, or presents the causes for you to practice patience, and therefore you should feel grateful to them. Just like the guidance of hell world and the forest of rather sharp leaves, so is the suffering produced by my actions. With whom, therefore, should I be angry? Having been instigated by my own actions, those who cause me harm come into being. If by these actions they should fall into hell, surely isn't it I who am destroying them? In dependence upon them, I purify many transgressions by patiently accepting the harms that they cause. But in dependence upon me, they will fall into hellish pain in the very long time. So, since I am causing harm to them and they are benefiting me, why, unruly mind, do you have become angry in such a mistaken manner? Which says, thus, since patient acceptance is produced in dependence upon one with a very hateful mind, that person should be worthy of veneration, just like the sacred dharma, because they are a cause of patience. And then later also it says that we all venerate the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, the victorious ones, and their children. So what they actually think of is that they're compassionate towards all sentient beings. They're affectionate towards all sentient beings, like the only child of a mother. And therefore, by disregarding these sentient beings, what we do is we disregard the sentient beings, and particularly those who try to harm us, we consider them as our enemies or adversaries, and try to disregard them. But instead of doing that, so all sentient beings should be our object of compassion and affection, just as the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas have considered all sentient beings affectionately, like the only child of a mother. And so it says, therefore, the Mighty One has said that the field of sentient beings is similar to a Buddha field, for many who have pleased them have thereby reached perfection. So one of the obstacles to the practice of joyous effort is laziness, which includes that of despising oneself and also being distracted towards bad things. So in other words, our actions whereby we try to look after the near and dear ones and try to crush the so-called enemies. And the main enemy or the obstacle to this practice is that of despising or belittling oneself. And so in order to overcome them, the Mahayana Uttara Tantra teaches that we have the Buddha nature. And so, with regard to the empty nature of the mind, the emptiness of the Buddha's mind and empty nature of our mind are of the same identity or nature. And so the Buddhas have become enlightened by practicing the path. And similarly, we can also overcome these afflictions and reach that same goal or attainment as the Buddhas have. And therefore, you should overcome this despising oneself, this feeling that you are nothing, that you cannot do this and that, and have the courage to pursue the path, thereby attaining that of the goal of enlightenment. Because feeling demoralized completely will lead you nowhere.
말해. 다 된다. 류제바.
So, the 8th, chapter 8. Having developed into Shiism in this way, I should place my mind in concentration. It begins. So the disturbed or perturbed state of mind should, through anger and hatred, is overcome through patience, and then you create a state of mind which can actually be sustained for their wholesome practices. And therefore you should have this courage, thinking that, what is it there that I cannot accomplish? So, regarding the Buddha Shakyamuni himself, by popular account, the Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree in Bodh Gaya or Vajrasana. And then, also, we can talk about the Buddha having gone through the three countless eons of accumulating merit and wisdom. And similarly, the masters, Nagarjuna and so forth, have become enlightened through their practice, because of understanding their Buddha nature, that they have Buddha nature, and having the courage to determine and to pursue their path. They have practiced, endured the hardships, and become enlightened. And similarly, so accordingly, they have tread on the journey to enlightenment, treading through the paths of accumulation, preparation, seeing and meditation, and so forth. So in order for us to be able to focus our mind and meditate on emptiness, or without single-pointed concentration, you will not be able to really focus single-pointedly on emptiness, although you may be able to focus to a certain degree. And therefore, we need to develop that of single-pointed concentration, meditative concentration. So you should be able to focus your mind without distraction, and should be able to sustain the meditation without those of the obstacles, which mainly comprise mental laxity or sinking and mental excitation. These should be overcome while being able to stay on the focus. You should be alert as well, so that you are free from the defects of mental laxity and mental excitation. So when you in the process of developing single-pointed concentration, if your mind becomes rather low-spirited, then you should try to brighten it up, raise it up. And similarly, when your mind is too excited, you should try to mellow it down, and so you should follow the instructions accordingly to overcome these two faults of laxity and excitation. And having done that, then this chapter goes through that of the cultivation of bodhicitta. So in order to be able to, for one's mind to stay on focus, what actually distracts us is those of the distraction and distraction towards sensual pleasure, sensual objects, and therefore the text also goes through the antidote or the countermeasures to such distractions. And also it goes through the excellent qualities of a solitude. Look at verse number 90. First of all, I should make an effort to meditate upon the equalities between self and others. I should protect all beings as I do myself, because we are all equal in wanting pleasure and not wanting pain. So not only human beings, but all sentient beings are same in not wanting suffering, but wanting happiness. So all sentient beings are equal in wanting happiness. You are just a single individual, whereas others are infinite. And therefore, it is more important. The others are more important than oneself. So it is. If we talk about doing business, of course, you need to spend some money first in order to be able to make profits later. So if you are able to actually think of the suffering of others and to bring happiness to others in such a manner that you are not just thinking of alleviating their suffering temporarily, but you are actually thinking of reaching that of the goal of enlightenment, Buddhahood, the omniscient state. And therefore, by reflecting on the faults or the disadvantages of or the shortcomings of selfish attitude and thinking or reflecting on the advantages of cherishing others over oneself, then you would be really able to develop a peaceful state of mind within, whereby you are able to see all sentient beings as your near and dear ones. So that none of the sentient beings would be considered as those to be overcome and enemies and so forth. The more peaceful you are, the external events will not disturb you. Whereas if you are not peaceful within, then the things around you, people and so forth, will also appear as your adversaries. Whereas if you are peaceful, truly peaceful within, then all other things around you would look as conducive conditions for your near and dear ones. Look at 129, verse number 129 of whatever joy there is in this world will come from desiring others to be happy, and whatever suffering there is in this world will come from desiring myself to be happy. What need is there to say much more? The childish work for their own benefit, the Buddha's work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. If I do not actually exchange my happiness with the suffering of others, for the suffering of others, I shall not attain state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence shall I have no joy. So even in the world, we can see that those who think about others more than oneself, just helping the people who are sick, poor, and so forth. So we have examples like Mother Teresa and Mahatma Gandhi, and in Africa, Nelson Mandela. Mother Teresa and Master Mahatma Gandhi in India, and Bishop Tutu and so forth. So those who are more dedicated for the well-being of others, they are liked by others, admired by others more. Next, verse number
쇼로가 야 죽수리고
169, which says,
랑진지들 쓰여래. 랑진지
so it talks about self-cherishing attitude, that previous time when you could overcome me is now past. Now I see your nature and your faults, and wherever you go, I shall destroy your ignorance. So far, since time beginningless, you have caused ruin to me, it's saying. So this self-cherishing attitude has been within us since time beginningless. So if you look at what it has done to us, we have remained like we are. And then in the world we see people who are very selfish, harming others, even going to the length of killing one another. I should immediately cast aside all thoughts of working for my own sake. By having sold you to others, I shall not become discouraged, but shall offer up all your strength to others. If having become unconscientious, I do not give you to all living beings, it is certain that you will deliver me to the guardians of the hells. For ages have you dealt with me like this, and I have suffered long. But now, recalling my grudges, I shall overcome your selfish thoughts. So next we move on to the next chapter, chapter on wisdom. So we have talked about it earlier. So this chapter goes through the meditation on selflessness of persons and selflessness of phenomena, and also those of the meditation on the placement of mindfulness on body, feelings, mind, and so forth. So if you turn to 139, verse number 139 of this chapter, so mainly based on the Master Nagarjuna's fundamental verses of the middle way, and also his disciple Buddhapalita commentary. So wherein Buddhapalita makes clear that things have no independent intrinsic existence. He says the things, he shall explain how things are conventionally existent. And he says, if things were to have any essential existence, what is the need for dependence for their establishment? So things have no intrinsic existence, but because things have no intrinsic existence, there's no other way than saying that they exist by way of designation. So without contacting the true existence which the mind has imputed, one will not apprehend its true nature, true and non-true existence, its emptiness. And the non-true existence, that is a negation of the false existence, also is clearly false. When his child dies in a dream, the dreamer's thought of the child's non-existence causes the thought of the child's existence to cease. Although the thought of this non-existence is false, it is still the ability to abandon the thought. So His Holiness finished reading the 9th chapter. So with the help of bodhicitta, your meditation on emptiness is a meditation whereby you are able to fulfill all your purpose. Whereas for those of the Shravakas, and particular Buddhas, their meditation on emptiness is not done with that motivation of bodhicitta, and therefore they are able to only overcome the mental afflictions, destructive emotions and mental afflictions, and not those of the residual stains of these afflictions. Whereas the bodhicittas, because of meditation on emptiness, with the help of bodhicitta, they are able to even overcome these residual stains as well, leading them to the culminating state of Buddhahood or omniscience. So with this, I have completed the teaching on Bodhisattva Charyavatara, which has the most excellent teaching on the spirit of enlightenment, which cherishes others more important than oneself. So if you are able to carry this book with you, it is your own guide and your instructions. So it is your own teacher as well. So even if the Buddha were to appear now before us, he would not have anything different from these teachings that are contained in the book. And so keep this book with you as your handbook and try to read it over and over again and integrate the teaching within yourself, so that later in the future when we meet, you may be able to bring the book which has all worn out and looks old. So that would show that you have really read the book well. Whereas if you have not read it, then it will remain rather new. And so today's Dharma discourse is done. So I'm leaving today, and you would also disperse to your own places. We'll separate to our different places. Physically we may separate, but in spirit we'll be together. And so you should recall what I have told you, instructed you. This is a dedication verse from the King of Prayers. Inji Ajajik Dembasichu Kazanchalash Undi, Pajingata Lengalis. May I be moved for compassion to rekindle the teaching where it has spread but declined, and to illuminate the places where it has not spread before.